First, thanks a lot for the invitation. So indeed, I will talk about rational inference with mixtures of Gaussian. And it's a joint work with Marguerite Petit-Alamon, who's my PhD student here at CREST, Institut Polytechnique, and Marc Lambert, who is a researcher at INRIA. And I will present so first work called Variational Inference with Mixtures of Isotropic Gaussians that was published at NeurIPS with both Marguerite and Marc. And if I have some time at the end of the talk, the follow-up that we have been writing with Marguerite, which is more focused on the theory, which is why you see the word analysis. And yes, a warm thanks to Marguerite, who did a large part of the slides today. So yeah, I will talk about these works. Please interrupt me at any time if anything is not clear, either in terms of notations or motivation. Okay, so my talk is articulated as follows. So first, I will introduce a bit the problem. Then I will provide some background on the Wasserstein and Bür's geometry that is underlying the problem of variational inference when you work with Gaussian distributions. Then in the third part of the talk, I will switch to the mixture of Gaussian setting. And the last part of the talk, if I have time, once again, is about the theoretical analysis that has been conducted. All right, so our problem is the following. We consider a target probability distribution denoted pi, whose density is also denoted pi. So it's in P2 denotes the set of probability distributions on RZ with bounded second moment. And it's written as follows. Its density proportional to exponential minus v, where v is called the potential. Our goal is to generate samples from this probability distribution. And so I don't need to motivate a lot in this seminar, I think, but you can think of applications in Bayesian posterior distributions, for instance. So a standard approach is MCMC. You can think of any MCMC scheme where you design a Markov chain whose law will converge to the one of pi. But one drawback of MCMC is that in practice, when the potential V is non-convex, or said in another manner, pi is multimodal, these schemes can be quite slow to converge in practice and require many iterations. So alternatively, what has been proposed as an alternative approach is a variational inference, where in this approach, your goal is to approximate pi by solving an optimization problem written as follows. So you will minimize a KL, Kullback-Leibler divergence, between a candidate mu and pi, and mu lives in a parametric family of distributions. So C is the parametric family called the variational family. Mu is the rational distribution. So typically the minimizer of this problem is referred to as the variational posterior. The Kullback-Leibler is defined here as follows. Okay, so it's the integral of log mu over pi, which is the density of mu relative to pi, d mu, and plus infinity else. So it's you may want to minimize this objective because first it can solve for mu equals pi, and also it's tractable even if you don't know the normalization constant of pi. Okay, so this is why people have chosen to minimize the KL in practice. So this work is about tackling this problem, and typically we will consider C, the variational family, to be a family of mixtures of Gaussian. So it will not be exactly the set of all mixtures of Gaussian. In practice, we will restrict a bit the setting. We will consider mixtures of Gaussian with uniform weights. Okay. And we will design and analyze optimization algorithms that lead to tractable schemes on this family. Okay, so this will be the goal of the talk. So to explain what we have been doing, so I need to introduce a bit some background on the Wasserstein and Bür's geometry, which are underlying the optimization, not exactly of mixtures of Gaussians originally, but of the set of Gaussians. So Okay, my goal is to optimize the Kullback-Leibler divergence over the set of probability distributions, for instance, Gaussians or mixtures of Gaussian. It's an optimization problem where the search space is very large. And first, I want to recall some basics of optimization in RD. If you were to minimize the function in RD, that I call f, you can minimize this function by, so in continuous time, following its gradient flow. Okay, so its gradient flow would be this ordinary differential equation here. You have a curve xt following the gradient flow. So this denotes the time derivative of xt, and this is minus the gradient of f. Okay, so this is a continuous time approach that you could follow to minimize f, but in practice, you need to discretize it. You have two kinds of direct discretizations. The first one is a proximal scheme, which is called implicit time discretization, where you choose some step size gamma, and you write that at time k plus 1, the next iterate in RD is minimizing f plus some square penalty, square Euclidean norm penalty, with respect to the previous iterate. Okay, so if you write the first order condition of this problem, you will find that x at time k plus 1 writes as xk minus gamma grad f at xk plus 1. Okay, so this is one possible time discretization of the flow. So it's implicit because if you want to solve this equation, you see that it's implicit in xk plus 1. Maybe another discretization that is more famous and easier to compute is gradient descent. Gradient descent is called an explicit time discretization because you would discretize this flow not as follows here, with the gradient of f evaluated at the next point, but the gradient of f evaluated at the previous point. Okay, so both gradient descent or proximal schemes are discrete time approximations of the gradient flow. And when the step size goes to 0, these interpolated sequences converge to the solution of equation 1. So what I wrote is a bit informal. For gradient descent, you need a bit more assumptions, but this is the idea. Any questions until here? Or this is just interrupt me anytime. Okay, so this is what you would do for optimization in RD. Okay, when you want to minimize what is called a functional on the space of probability distribution, you can kind of replicate these ideas. So let's say we want to minimize f of mu over the set of probability distributions with bounded second moment. Typically, when we do variational inference, we were considering the Kullback-Leibler divergence between mu and pi. Then, if I want to design a discrete time sequence of probability distributions minimizing this functional, I can consider the JKO scheme, so from the names of Jordan, Kinderlehrer, and Otto, and replicate the proximal point algorithm that I had just before. Okay, where I say mu at time k plus 1, it minimizes my functional plus some squared penalty between mu and the previous iterate. I still have chosen a step size gamma. And here the squared penalty is measured in terms of Wasserstein 2 distance. Okay, so I recall the definition of Wasserstein 2 distance. It's minimizing the squared Euclidean norm integrated with respect to coupling S between mu and nu. So it's a joint probability distribution with first marginal mu and second marginal mu. Okay, and it has this Wasserstein 2 distance has a lot of so is inheriting a lot of properties of the Euclidean distance due to this choice of the Euclidean distance as the ground cost. Okay, and so if you consider this discrete time scheme and that you let gamma the step size go to 0, this sequence of iterates probably, so the mu k plus 1, which are probability distributions, they converge to a curve of probability distribution, mu t, that we call a Wasserstein flow. Okay, so this curve, mu t, is a continuous time curve over probability distributions, so living in that space. And this curve is described by a continuity equation where the vector field, Vt, is the negative gradient of the functional I'm considering in the Wasserstein 2 sense. So I will give a bit more details on what is it, but roughly it's the equivalent of a continuous time Euclidean flow, but here written on the space of probability distributions. Okay, so this JKO schemes was very so it's both useful for practice because it leads to a discrete time algorithm, and it's useful for the theory because this is how you basically prove the existence of Wasserstein flows. But in practice, it's still an algorithm that is very costly to implement because it is implicit. And so if you want to consider a less expensive scheme, you may want to consider explicit time discretization. So in the same manner as we were considering gradient descent before in the RD case. Okay, so how can I consider an explicit time discretization if I'm optimizing on the space of probability distributions? So I need to give slightly more details on the Wasserstein gradient. So the Wasserstein gradient of my objective f of mu is a map actually that lives in the tangent space. Okay, so I will explain a bit this drawing. And this map, so it's a map from RD to RD, okay, is written as a gradient of what is called the first variation, but basically this guy is the differential of my functional with respect to mu. Let me give more details. If I have f that is the kn, its first variation, like if I differentiate the kl with respect to mu, since I have integral log mu over pi d mu, differentiating with respect to mu, you will find this. Okay, just consider the derivative of the function x log x, and you will find that you obtain this. This is a map from RD to R. Okay, if I evaluate this density ratio in the log, and if I take the gradient, I get a map from RD to RD. Okay, geometrically, you give me a point mu. This is in brown. This is a space of probability distribution. I have a map that is a gradient of my function at mu, and it gives me a direction, an admissible map that I can use to push mu to push mu so that it decreases my function. Okay, so you can use this, and you can actually write a kind of Riemannian gradient descent that is just a discretization of the flow, and it will write like this. So at time k plus 1, you push the previous iterate by a map that is identity minus the step size times the gradient. Okay, and in practice, it goes back to if you have particles distributed at mu k, the image measure or the push forward measure is obtained as follows. So you have samples from the image measure by just applying this map to xk, right? So xk plus 1. Here you have xk minus gamma the gradient, and you see that xk, and it's a sample from uk plus 1. Okay. So this was a bit technical. It will be slightly less. It will be less technical in the next slide. I was just giving this geometry interpretation because it will be useful later to interpret what we are doing with Gaussians and mixtures of Gaussians. So let me go back to my problem, which is I want to optimize my functional, like the KL between mu and pi, over the set of Gaussian distribution. Okay, so I'm considering this variational problem first on the space of Gaussian distributions. I will go to mixtures of Gaussian a bit later. So if I consider the space of Gaussians equipped with the Wasserstein to distance, it's called the Burs-Wasserstein space. Okay, so it's the space of non-degenerate Gaussians, okay, that we will call BW. So with mean M and variance sigma. And we equip this space with the Wasserstein to distance. So if you think of previously, I had a space of probability distributions with bounded second moment equipped with the Wasserstein to distance. This space had already a geometrical structure, which I tried to give some taste about this slightly before. And here you can think of the space of Gaussians equipped with the Wasserstein to distance as a submanifold. Okay, it's a smaller space, including this one, and that we equip with the same geometry. Okay. What is nice is that the Wasserstein to distance in practice that I had written in terms of couplings before. So the general formulation of Wasserstein distance is not closed form, but for Gaussian, it has a closed form. In particular, if you consider two Gaussians with means M0 and 1, variance sigma 0, sigma 1, the Wasserstein to distance squared, it splits as two parts. The first one is basically the Euclidean square norm between the means. And the second one is, here we see it's a squared Bures distance. And the Bures distance is a valid distance on PSD matrices. Okay, so the expression is slightly complicated, but this is the Bures distance. Okay. So now if I want to optimize, to decrease my functional, the KL on the space of Gaussians, I can write the JKO scheme. So remember that the JKO scheme was this discrete time scheme where I was minimizing my functional plus a square penalization with respect to the previous iterate. If I do this, but restricted to the space of Gaussians, then this scheme, when the step size goes to 0, these iterates, these Gaussians, they converge to a curve of Gaussians that is called the Bures-Wasserstein flow. Okay, so it's a curve of Gaussian, okay, indexed by time. These Gaussians, they are ruled by, they are described by MT, their mean, M depends on time, and their variance, sigma t, depending on time as well. Okay, so I have similarly a curve of Gaussians. But remember, so the JKO is useful for defining an implicit scheme, so it's a valid time discretization, but it's expensive. It's also interesting for properly defining the flow, but in practice it's expensive and we may prefer explicit time discretizations. And this is doable. I didn't write the evolution of MT and sigma t, but you can write them. Actually, if you look at the JKO, you make the step size goes to 0, you can derive the equations ruling the evolution of MT and sigma t, and you can discretize them explicitly. Okay, so you give me a step size, gamma. I denote mu k, the Gaussian iterate at time k, and I consider an explicit time discretization of the Bures-Wasserstein flow, okay, of these curves of Gaussian. And I can write how the mean and variance evolve at each step, okay, depending on my step size gamma. And here you see that the mean is pushed at each time by gamma times something. So this something is an expectation of the grade log of the density ratio with respect to mu k. So this happens in RD. This basically, you can think of it as the gradient of the objective with respect to the mean. Okay, so you're like applying gradient descent with respect to the mean. And here on the variance, what do we see? We see that we have the previous variance here, and here we have the identity matrix minus gamma times another matrix. Okay, so this matrix is not a PSD in general. And here you can think of this guy as being basically the gradient of the KL with respect to the variance. So you can see that this looks like some Riemannian gradient descent on the space of PSD matrices, and it's actually the case. So what is nice is that, okay, everything here is computable. You can, so here I didn't write it, but mu k is the density of the Gaussian. So actually these expressions, they simplify a lot. And you just remain with quantities depending on nabla log pi, which is, so remember that pi is proportional to exponential minus v. So you have access to this grad v, and quantities depending on the Hessian of pi, so the Hessian of v. Okay, so everything here is implementable. And why does it work well in the Bures-Wasserstein case? It's because when we wrote the JKO scheme, which was basically this discrete time scheme where we were minimizing the KL plus some square penalization with respect to the previous iterate, we used the Wasserstein distance, and the Wasserstein distance between Gaussians, it splits well between the contributions of the means and the contribution of the variances. And this is why when you write the first order condition of the JKO scheme and you go to the limits, you have nice decoupled equations between the mean and the variance. Any questions here? We'll go on. All right. Maybe some geometric interpretation before going to the case of mixtures. There's a rich geometric interpretation actually when you work with the Bures-Wasserstein geometry. So remember that previously I explained to you that if you minimize the functional on the space of probability distributions, with respect to the Wasserstein geometry, you have a curve which is called the Wasserstein flow. It's just a curve decreasing the loss on the space of probability measures. And then we restrict it to the space of Gaussians, okay, so that we call the Burs-Wasserstein space, which was a submanifold of the space of probability distributions with bounded moment. And actually, when you look at the Burs-Wasserstein flow, which is basically the curve of measures decreasing your objective functional, but restricted to the space of Gaussian. So this curve of measures is also described by a continuity equation. And the continuity equation is ruled by a vector field that is the gradient of the objective with respect to the Burs-Wasserstein geometry. And this guy, I wrote it here. You can think of it, it is actually, we know it, the projection. So you take the Wasserstein gradient, which was a map from RD to RD. You project it onto the tangent space to the space of Gaussians at point mu. Okay, so you can write this projection formally like this. Okay, so this is a map from RD to RD. You consider the L2 projection and you project onto the space that I wrote here. And this will give you the Burs-Wasserstein gradient. And this, the tangent space to the space of Gaussians at point mu. Okay, so mu is a Gaussian. Mu is a Gaussian with mean mu. So this space is a space of functions, so also from RD to RD, but much smaller, right, than what we had before. It's actually a space of affine functions, right? You push x to some intercept plus you scale x minus mu, the current mean, by s. So what does it tell you? It tells you, okay, if you want to evolve on the space of Gaussians, you have to take directions that are affine, which is logical, right? Otherwise, you may escape the space of Gaussians. If you push by a Gaussian by an affine function, you remain Gaussian. So everything is going well. Okay. So yes, so you can think of the Burs-Wasserstein flow as a projected Wasserstein flow. Okay, you had a non-constrained problem, which was optimizing the KL on the space of probability distributions. You have a curve associated to this, decreasing the loss. But now if you want to optimize on the space of Gaussians, you have to project this curve basically on the space of Gaussians, and this is a projected flow. So fortunately for us, if you consider the KL as your loss, we can write, so we had seen it before, we can write what is the Wasserstein gradient of the loss. So it's this map, grad log mu over pi. So you would push mu by this map from RD to RD. And if you look for the Burs-Wasserstein gradient, you can apply this formula and you will find that the projection of this gradient is this affine function. Okay, so you see that there's an intercept, okay, the A here, and there's x minus mu scaled by some matrix. Okay, and morally, you can think of this as the gradient of the KL with respect to the mean, and this is the gradient of the KL with respect to the variance. Okay, and the last geometric interpretation, if you think of Burs-Wasserstein gradient descent, so the scheme that I showed here, that tells you, okay, in discrete time, how you can apply like gradient descent to your Gaussian, you can write it as follows. So you can write that this scheme, so the Gaussian at time k plus 1, described by the mean mk plus 1 and variance sigma k plus 1, is obtained by pushing the Gaussian at time k by this map that is identity minus a step size times the Burs-Wasserstein gradient. So once again, this is an affine function, the identity. This is an affine function as well, as we have seen. So here you are pushing a Gaussian by an affine function, you remain Gaussian. Okay? Okay. Is there any question on the Burs-Wasserstein scheme before I go to the mixture of Gaussian? Everything is fine.
I wanted to ask quickly if it's I hadn't seen it described this way, but it's somehow you define the usual Wasserstein gradient and then you somehow do linear regression in a sense.
Projection, right?
Yeah. But it has the same interpretation somehow.
Yes.
And so in the expression in the red box,
Yes.
for things other than the KL, is it something like you have the usual functional derivative and then you differentiate it once or twice and it looks the same? Is this right?
So so if you take any functional here, the
Mhm.
Wasserstein gradient you would differentiate and so sorry. If you have you take any functional maybe I should go just slightly here. Yeah, you take any function, you take its flat
Yep.
derivative, then the Wasserstein gradient is this guy. This is a map from RD to RD. And now,
Yep.
if you want to obtain the Bürst gradient, you need to solve
Go
this
one
equation.
more.
You need to.
Okay.
So in general, yeah, here it works well for the KL, but for other functionals, maybe I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you.
But maybe one word about the Bürst-Wasserstein descent before I go to the case of mixture of Gaussian is that in practice, here I was interested in optimizing the KL over the space of Gaussians. The space of Gaussians is described by its mean and variance matrix, okay, which is a PSD matrix. What you would like to do is roughly gradient descent, right? So you can do this on the mean, which has the space of means has a Euclidean geometry. So this is why you have kind of Euclidean gradient descent iterations. But the space of PSD matrices, you have to be careful because you want to remain onto the space of PSD matrices. And when you equip it with the Bürst distance, you have a kind of Bürst Riemannian gradient descent on the space of PSD matrices, and you remain on this space, which is why it's fine. Okay, so now I will go to the case. Yeah.
Question. Can you explain how does the algorithm compare with the usual gradient descent? Like when I parameterize the mean and covariance and draw one gradient descent.
So if you do gradient descent on the mean and covariance, mean and variance matrix, so the mean update it will be the same. So here, so this I need to simplify it a bit, but basically you will recover the same update. And the reason is that gradient descent, it corresponds to optimizing vectors respect to the squared Euclidean geometry. So this is what appears in the Wasserstein to distance for the mean. So you will have the same. But for the variance, if you apply, I would say a bit naively gradient descent, you wouldn't have this kind of iterations. You would write something like sigma k plus 1 is equal to sigma k minus gamma times the gradient of the loss respect to sigma. And this iteration, it may diverge from the set of PSD matrices. Notably, if gamma is not chosen carefully, is a bit too large. Whereas here, you multiply on the left and right by the same matrix, so basically you will remain positive.
But if I optimize the covariance on the PSD manifold, what it?
So if you optimize but when you talk about manifold, you're choosing a geometry. So this is why I'm saying, indeed, if you optimize the covariance matrix on the space of PSD matrices equipped with the Bürst geometry, and the Bürst geometry is basically this distance, then you find this equation. It's the same. So indeed, you can think of Bürst-Wasserstein gradient descent as optimizing means respect to the Euclidean geometry and PSD matrices with respect to the Bürst geometry.
Thank you, that makes sense.
And this arises because we consider the Wasserstein to distance that writes as two splittable parts. Okay, so now we'll go to the space of mixtures of Gaussian. So we want to generalize this to mixtures of Gaussians. Why? Because of course Gaussians are poorly expressive. If I was motivated originally by considering posterior SPI with non-convex landscapes, so multimodal ones, and I consider this family of mixtures of Gaussians. Okay, so it's family. So I fix n, the number of components. So it's a sum of uniformly weighted Gaussians. Okay, they are all weighted by 1 over n. Each of these Gaussian is described by mean mi and variance sigma I, and this is my set. Okay, so I want to do the same, to apply the same recipe, but on the space of mixtures of Gaussian. Okay, I want to obtain some discrete time scheme. Maybe nice construction for the continuous time dynamics before discretizing them and so on. So I want to do this. However, what is hard in this case is that before, when I was restricted to Gaussians here, okay, so if n was equal to 1, I had a closed form formula for the Wasserstein 2 distance. So when I was writing the first order condition of this problem, I could derive easily the evolution of the mean and variance. Okay, so this is what I showed before. Now, for mixtures of Gaussian, the Wasserstein 2 distance between two mixtures, even with n components, it's not closed form, right? I can only use this the formulation with the infimum over couplings. So it's not a closed form. Okay. So people have been actually interested in this problem, and there has been some attempts to, for instance, define distance between Gaussian mixtures that basically guarantee that you remain a Gaussian mixture, that you restrict couplings. Okay, sorry, I will say it another way. There have been attempts to somehow restrict the definition of Wasserstein distance between Gaussian mixtures so that you guarantee that somehow the interpolation remains a Gaussian mixture. Okay, so this has been done in this paper by Delon and Desaulniers. They write an optimal transport problem as before between two distributions, but they restrict, they impose that the optimal coupling transporting one probability distribution onto the other is a mixture of Gaussian. In particular, so I don't write their definition here, but you can show that in their setting, if you use their distance called MW2 between two mixtures of Gaussian with uniform weights and the same number of components, it writes as a sum of Wasserstein 2 distance between each of these components, okay, where you just have to choose the best permutations to match mu I onto nu I. Okay, so this should remind you for people used to optimal transport between discrete distributions. It's like the Hungarian algorithm. You have to match one atom onto the other. So here it's the same, but at the level of probability distributions. Okay, so this is it. So this is nice. And now how can we use it for our case? So we will consider what we call an adapted JKO scheme where at each step I consider this proximal scheme where I instead of putting the Wasserstein 2 distance, I have put the modified Wasserstein distance restricted to Gaussian measures. Sorry, to Gaussian mixtures. Okay. So in particular, we have seen that this distance between two mixtures of Gaussian, it writes as a sum of Wasserstein 2 distances between each of these guys. And remind that all the mu I are Gaussians. Okay, so these Wasserstein distances, I can compute them in closed form. It's the formula of Burs-Wasserstein that we've seen before, where I had the squared distance between the means and the Burs distance between their variances. Okay, so these are closed form because all the indices I are Gaussian. And in particular, what is the best permutation? When I do this kind of JKO schemes, I want to compare mu, that is the new candidate Gaussian mixture, to the previous Gaussian mixture. Okay, if my step size is small, basically all the mu I, all the components mu I are close to the previous mu ki. So actually, the permutation is just the identity. So actually, we can write, maybe if it's too fast, just believe me, you can write that this distance writes actually as a sum of Wasserstein 2 distance between the new candidate component mu I and the previous one. Okay, so we end up with this optimization problem at each step. Okay, we have chosen a step size gamma and we have this. And now remember once again, so I want to optimize, so Cn is my space of mixtures of Gaussian. Okay, so mu basically writes as this mixture of Gaussian. Okay, they are uniformly weighted and mu j is a Gaussian, so it belongs to the space BW. And now, yes, in this sum, I have also a sum of Wasserstein 2 distance squared. So I can basically, this was my whole mixture, and now I can consider, like, not exactly independently, but in parallel, for all components I from 1 to n, their sub-problem, right? I can say, okay, what is the evolution of component I at time k plus 1? It's like minimizing this loss plus the Wasserstein 2 distance between the previous component I at time k. Okay. So we do this, basically, think of your mixture, mu. Mu is the sum of mu j, and each of these components are updated through this rule. Okay, so maybe just before going to the algorithm, this is how you construct the discrete sequence, and then we can do all the recipe as before. We can make the step size go to 0. We can define a continuous time curve, and this is already a discrete time algorithm, but as before, it's an implicit time algorithm. So we prefer to basically discretize the flow in an explicit manner, like gradient descent. And this is doable, and it leads to this algorithm. So this algorithm, it was not proposed by us originally. It was a paper of Marc, my co-author, Sino Chewy, Sylvain Bonabel, Francis Bach, and Philippe Rigolet. And they applied this recipe. The algorithm works as follows. You take a step size, some number of iterations. Okay, you choose a number of components. And all the components in your Gaussian mixtures are initialized with initial mean M0I and sigma 0I. Okay, and then your Gaussian mixture, each component will be evolved at iteration k as follows. So you push the mean through a gradient descent, so as before. So this is exactly the term we had before. It was grad log mu over pi, so it writes as this, because grad log pi is grad v. And each of the variants is updated as before. Okay, the only difference is that before we had this kind of functions, but the expectation was over the whole distribution mu, whereas now the expectation is only over the component I. But still, you can think that all the components are evolved in parallel, but they interact through the terms mu k, okay, which are not indexed by I. Recall that mu k is a whole mixture, while mu ki is one component I, okay? So basically, think that all these components are evaluated in parallel, and the way they interact is through evaluating the density of the mixture. Okay. In practice, these gradients are evaluated through Monte Carlo approximations, right? Because here you need the expectation with respect to a Gaussian density. In practice, you will draw samples from it. Okay. I will be a bit brief on this part. Just if I have time in the end, in continuous time, you can describe the evolution of the mixture. Okay, the mixture mu t. Sorry, there is a sum lacking here. And you can describe that all components mu t I are driven by continuity equations, where the vector field is the projection of the Wasserstein gradient on the Burs-Wasserstein space related to component mu I. Okay, so this was not in the paper of Marc. It's something that we've done with Marguerite recently. You can basically generalize the geometric interpretation to the mixture case. Okay. All right. So the problem with this algorithm introduced by Marc and his co-authors is that we are optimizing a mixture of Gaussians in dimension d. Okay, so I have n components living in dimension d, so with mean vectors in Rd and covariance matrices in of size d times d squared. Okay, so in practice, because of the covariance matrices, this does not scale with the dimension. And what we proposed with Marguerite and Marc more recently in this paper was to actually restrict to not the whole space of PSD matrices, but only the space of isotropic matrices. Okay, so the space of isotropic Gaussians. So I will write what it is. Okay, so what is an isotropic Gaussian? Let me remember. Let me recall you, sorry. The space of isotropic Gaussians it's a space of Gaussians written as follows. So it's the space of Gaussians in Rd, described by a mean vector M, and now the variance matrix is supposed to be proportional to epsilon time identity. Okay, and epsilon is a strictly positive scalar. Okay, so you can think of this space as a submanifold of the space of Gaussians that we had before. Okay, remember the space of Gaussians equal to the Wasserstein 2 distance was itself a submanifold of the space of probability distribution with bounded second moment. And now we are considering an even smaller space. Okay. Since it's a smaller space than the Burs-Wasserstein space, we inherit a lot of properties that we had before, but it's even simpler, right? If you give me two isotropic Gaussians that I denote IBW, So their variance matrices are proportional to epsilon 0 identity and epsilon 1 identity. I still have the same Euclidean square norm between the means. And now the Bures distance, remember it was written in terms of sigma 0, sigma 1, and square roots of the matrices. It reduces to this formula, okay, which is just, you give me two positive scalars and I can compute that, okay. So it's very nice. This I think I will skip, but basically you can interpret, you can define the gradient of the loss respect to the geometry on the isotropic Bures-Wasserstein space, just applying the same recipes as before, but now the space of affine functions, that is actually the tangent space to the space of isotropic Gaussians at point nu, is even smaller because the space of affine function, right, as follows. So before we had a matrix S that was symmetric, and now it's just scaled by a scalar. Okay. All right, so I will just skip this because of time, but this gradient that we need to apply, it gets simpler, but because of this term here involving Hessians, you may think that it still scales in D square, but actually we have a trick. We just use the right integration by parts, and we can reduce this cost from D square to D. All right, so I want to jump to the algorithm. Basically, what we did with Marguerite and Mark was to take the previous algorithm and to rewrite it in the space of isotropic mixtures of Gaussian. So it's actually a subcase. What we did originally was a subcase of the algorithm and Mark. So we have the same algorithm as before, updating the means with gradient descent, and now the update on the variance, it writes like this. Okay, so we update just scalars, okay, scalar epsilon, and basically this equation is the equivalent of what we had before. Before the full covariance case, it was written like this. So we had basically this was the gradient of the loss with respect to the variance sigma. So we recognize this guy here, and these terms, identity minus gamma, this matrix, in dimension 1, because we are working with isotropic matrices, they write as 1 minus gamma times this scalar squared. Okay, so recognize epsilon ki is basically the equivalent of this, and this 1 minus gamma gradient squared is the equivalent of 1 minus gamma m, 1 minus gamma m. Okay, so what do we see? First, maybe here it's even more in the isotropic Gaussian case, it's even more clear that the variance remain positive. Okay, because we are basically multiplying the previous variance by 1 minus gamma something squared. And we have a cost, the total cost, both in terms of memory and computation, that is in O of nd, right? Because n is the number of components, and each component is actually described by a mean in Rd and a variance, which is a scalar. Okay, so it's actually a d plus 1. Okay. So very quickly, we actually propose in this paper not only the subcase of Mark previous algorithm, we actually proposed another one, which is a mirror descent. To introduce it more clearly, recall that when we were, so I will write it in the case of mono Gaussian case, so just n equals 1 because it's easier to understand. Recall that when I introduced the optimization algorithm on the space of Gaussians, we were optimizing a function f, and we were restricting the discrete time sequence to Gaussians. And using the Wasserstein to distance, we had quantities like this appearing, right? Because I was penalizing by the Wasserstein to distance between mu and the previous Gaussian, I had a term involving the means and a term involving the Bures distance. Okay, so this was what we had before. So we thought that actually, related to Stefan Liu's question, actually the space of PSD matrices, here we had equipped it with the Bures distance, but we could equip it with another geometry, something that enables you to stay on the set of PSD matrices. And this is doable. Actually, if you replace the burst distance by the von Neumann entropy, which is a quantity defined for PSD matrices as follows. Okay, so it's basically a trace of the first matrix log of the first minus log of the second and renormalized. So you can write this in terms of the spectrum of both matrices. This is a valid divergence between PSD matrices. And in the case of isotropic matrices, which are just described by epsilon and tau, two scalars, it simplifies to this quantity. Okay, so we propose to do this. And when you play with this quantity in the descent scheme, it gives you another update for the variance. Instead of having epsilon k times 1 minus gamma gradient, you get epsilon k times exponential minus gamma, the same gradient. Okay. All right. So we did that. We can, of course, define it for mixtures of Gaussian. And I just want, before talking about experiments, to mention that before us, people had actually considered alternative schemes to optimize, to solve variational inference on the space of mixtures of Gaussian. So I'm particularly thinking of this paper by Lin and co-authors. And people have come up, for instance, with an algorithm called the natural gradient descent. It was called natural gradient descent because it was operating on the natural parameter. Remember that, so I didn't remind it here, but a Gaussian density, it's an exponential distribution. Sorry, there is some noise. That can be described with a natural parameter. So, and you can write an algorithm called natural gradient descent. So let me give more details. If you give me the objective function on means and variances, which is here the KL between the mixture and the target, you can write the natural gradient descent updates of this paper as follows. So you have an update on the mean, sorry, on the variance, an update on the mean. And where does it come from? It comes from applying what is called natural gradient descent. Okay, so this should be a big F, but basically it's a gradient descent where you rescale the gradient by a geometry given by the Hessian of the partition function. And the natural parameter is a vector composed of, here it's the mean divided by the variance, and here it's minus 1/2 the variance. Okay, so people had come up with this scheme originally. And this scheme has two problems, according to us. First, if you look at the update on the variance here, okay, so you have to revert it, but basically, this update does not guarantee that the variance parameter epsilon remains positive. Second, the update on the mean is scaled by the variance. Okay, so if your update on the variance was reasonable, this is fine, but maybe if you have a big update on the variance, you may have a big update on the mean, and that may not be great for stability. Okay, so now that I have described everything, I can show you some experiments, then I will take questions, I think. So we basically conducted a lot of experiments, so we, Marguerite, and we compared our set of tools. Okay, so we consider here a mixture of Gaussian targets in dimension 2, and we considered different schemes. So BW was basically the original scheme of Mark and his co-authors, where you optimize a mixture of Gaussians where the components have full covariance matrix, okay, so in D squared. IBW is our subcase where we restrict to isotropic Gaussian components. Okay, so we reduce the cost to O of D. Gradient descent would be a scheme where you don't optimize the variances. Okay, you choose some variance and you don't optimize. And normalizing flow is a neural network based approach. So we basically conducted several experiments with various numbers of Gaussian components, right? So for instance, if you look, let's say at n equals 10, you can see that, okay, the curve with the lowest objective loss, which is the KL, is indeed BW, which is the full covariance case, okay? But if you look at isotropic restrictions, such as IBW and MD, which are the blue and orange curve, it's actually not so far. Okay, so this tells you that there's not a big loss when you restrict to isotropic Gaussians. Okay, and visually this is what we see, right? If this is what you obtain with full covariances, and this is what you obtain with isotropic Gaussians. So maybe I will stop here first for questions, and then I will see what time we have. Do you have questions on what I presented until now?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're optimizing the reverse KL over the family of Gaussian mixtures with a fixed n,
Yes.
do you have any idea as to what the optimum looks like?
No, it's a good point. So thanks to the theory, I have an idea now that how to say. So it will depend on pi, right? So I want to optimize the KL between a Gaussian mixture with n components and pi. In the general case, I don't know. I mean, the global minimizer, if pi is a Gaussian mixture, is the true Gaussian mixture, right? If pi is a Gaussian, thanks to the theory, now we know that the best Gaussian mixture you can find is the one whose mean components, when you average them, they correspond to the mean of pi. Okay, and similarly for the covariances. Okay, so if you tell me, you give me pi that is a Gaussian with a mean m star and sigma star, what is the best mixture of Gaussian? Basically, is the one whose the means of the components, when you average them, they collapse to m star, and similarly for the sigma star. So, yeah.
Do you have any idea as to how the objective function decreases with n?
Yes, so I don't talk about it today, but we had some results already in the paper with my PhD student Tom Weeks, and that actually Marguerite generalized in this newest paper, but it's a bit hidden in the appendix. We cite it in the main, but it's hidden. But yes, you can show that if pi, your true target, belongs to the family of a mixture that you're considering, but potentially it's mixtures of, how to say, if pi is a mixture of Gaussian with possibly an infinite number of components, okay, and that you approximate it with a Gaussian mixture of n components, you can show that the KL decreases linearly respect to n, up to a factor log n. But basically, we have this kind of bound. But in the literature, people have actually obtained much tighter bounds in the d=1 case. So we think it's not tight. But it's a kind of approximation result that we have been investigating a bit and that we would like to push further.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Yep. Before I go on, can I ask how much time do I have so that I will choose?
I guess we've had questions during, so I wouldn't stress too much, but maybe take 3-4 minutes and then we can have a few more.
Okay. So all right. So this was for the two-dimensional experiments. We have more experiments, for instance. So still in this paper about here, for instance, we consider target distributions that are mixtures of Gaussians, but in high dimension. Okay, so these are more illustrative experiments. Let's say it was in d=20, dimension 20. We compared the same schemes. We looked at the marginals. What we saw that the natural gradient descent scheme, the red one, was really performing less well than the others. And what was interesting was this graph where basically we compared BW, which is optimizing the mixture of Gaussian with full covariance matrices, okay, so cost d square, with IBW, which is the subcase restricted to isotropic Gaussians. And what we see, if we compare the time to the dotted lines respect to the KL objective, which are the dashed lines, that the full covariance case, of course, gets very costly when you increase the dimension because of the cost d square, while IBW remains correct. And actually, you don't lose too much in terms of objective. IBW is a bit above BW, but it's reasonable. Okay, you don't degrade too much. So this was very satisfying. And we have more, this I will skip. We have more basically practical experiments on real data, like real Bayesian posteriors, including so either logistic regression and Bayesian neural network regression. So if you're interested, have a look at the paper. So I want just to in 1 minute to advertise our work that will be coming and what we have been working on. So we wanted to characterize the convergence of the BW scheme, which is the one updating the full covariance matrices. So it's the general scheme introduced by Marc Lambert and his co-authors originally. And what we did was to basically look at this scheme, look at the continuous time formulation, and we have several results. So first in continuous time, but also in discrete time, that I won't have to describe today, but let me maybe just jump to this kind of things. So we showed several things that will be coming. We showed first guarantees in continuous time, explaining how the objective decreasing along the continuous time dynamic, but in optimization, what is hard is when you jump to discrete time. So our first, let's say, big result is showing that if you pick a step size that is small enough, and small enough depends on the smoothness of your potential and lower bounds on the eigenvalues of the variances of the Gaussian components. Okay, so you don't want your Gaussian components to degenerate. If you pick a step size small enough, then you can show that the objective decreases at each iteration. Okay, it's because this quantity here is positive, and here you have a minus in front of it. So this is a kind of non-convex optimization guarantee that is called the descent lemma that we obtained. Here, assuming that we have the exact gradients. I don't consider first Monte Carlo approximations. And this has an interesting consequence because if you basically iterate this inequality, okay, you put the gradients on the left-hand side and the K on the right-hand side, and you telescope, you can obtain a rate of convergence for the average norm of the gradients, which is like the corollary. It's a non-convex optimization guarantee. The only thing to iterate this, to telescope these inequalities is to consider my assumptions that I had before on the non-degeneracy of the Gaussian components. I need to suppose that they hold across all iterations. But what is nice is that if you do that, you have this rate that tells you, okay, give me k iterations, and this quantity, the average norm of the gradients over k iterations, it decreases to 0 at rate 1 over big K. And to come back to the question sorry, I forgot your name, on the Gaussian mixtures before, this type of non-convex optimization guarantees, they don't tell you generally mu k converges to pi at this rate. Okay, they just tell you how fast the norm of the gradient goes to 0. But still, sometimes you can work a bit, you can massage a bit these conditions and extract asymptotic guarantees. And this was the case. For instance, if pi is Gaussian, our problem is still non-convex, yet we could extract from this condition that the mixture of Gaussians was converging to pi in the sense that the average means were converging to the one of pi, and similarly for the covariance. So it tells you that asymptotically you recover the target. So this was very satisfying. And we have experiments illustrating this. Both, so this is in different dimensions, but we have experiments illustrating. So we take basically the Burs-Wasserstein gradient descent scheme for Gaussian mixtures. We run it and we check, we compute these quantities, and we see that they match the rate that we predicted, okay, for various dimensions. And also we checked whether the conditions that we needed for this rate to hold were satisfied. And in particular, I talked about the non-degeneracy of the Gaussian components. Okay, I needed the variance matrices to be lower bounded by some constant. This is also true. Okay, so this is what we call lambda m. We checked across several dimensions. So Marguerite checked once again. And we have a non-degeneracy of the lower bound for Gaussian components across iterations, and this for various dimensions. So on this, I stop. So yeah, additional results will be in the upcoming preprint. Exponential decay up to some bias when the target is satisfying some Loxoblef condition. Generalization of the results for stochastic gradients. Yeah, basically the message of this talk was that in these two works, so there was a new paper with Marguerite and Mark and the upcoming preprint with Marguerite. We provide both practical and theoretical motivations for using this scheme that is called, that at least we call Burs-Wasserstein gradient descent generalized to mixtures of motion. So yeah, thanks for your attention and happy to take any questions.